today. All right, we are live. This is very exciting for our third live stream, and this is Warrior Woman 91, as you may have guessed by watching these live streams before. I'm very excited to have Amanda and Aaron back here again today, because like I said, they can't get enough of me. It's just, I don't know what's wrong with these people. So, today we are going to be talking about is free speech under assault in the United States, which I think that question has been rendered academic at this point. It clearly is. But our discussion is going to include an interview on the second hour with Mark, and his last name is Schierbecker, I believe, and he is the student journalist who was attacked by Melissa Click, the college professor at the University of Mizzou. We are going to be bringing him on the second hour. So, but before all that, we are going to talk to Amanda and Aaron and Harry, if he comes. Great. We're going to talk to them about why we've been seeing these free speech attacks on college campuses and all over the country. So, Aaron, why don't you start us off? Why have we been seeing these attacks on free speech across the United States?
Well, it's basically the left eating itself. I mean, like, it's basically progressive indoctrination coming home to roost, basically, because the whole point of leftism, it's the priority of feelings. Okay, it's all about feelings, not about facts, not about logic. It's all about feelings. Okay, and so unfortunately now we've reached the point where feelings has become such a high priority, where it's like if your feelings are hurt, it's the equivalent of violence, basically. And so they respond in kind with violence, which is what happened at CSULA, which I was at. I was at CSULA on the day of Ben's speech, and we were covering the protest. It was one of the more horrifying things I had ever seen. It's like basically a gigantic mob of swell college kids like chanting these, like, the usual leftist diatribe chants, like, united, the people never be defeated, and that kind of stupid stuff like that. And what was horrifying was that,
Amanda and I were jealous that you were there.
What's that? Yeah, I was there. Yeah. And
we're both jealous that you were there.
Yeah, I know. I wish I was there too.
Yeah. Oh, it was pretty scary, because it's like these were some really big, like, college kids that were, like, basically barricading the door, and anybody that tried to, like, just go enter and go see Ben speak, they would get violently assaulted. And I wrote about a couple of the victims. One of the victims, Jeffrey Mentor, is a disabled man because he has nerve damage in his arm. And they basically, like, they punched him, they kicked him, shoved him in law. There was a point in time where he told me he was just laying down on the ground because he was tired of being pushed around so much. He got, like, kicked for 15 minutes or so. He called 911 twice. The police didn't help him at all, of course. I mean, the police were zero helpful at the event. And then what really, like, what was also angry to them was that there was this girl named Ashley Ann Hobbins, and her father reached out to me after I wrote the article about Jeffrey Mentor. This girl is a deaf girl who is basically on the USA swim team, and she's, like, really good at what she does. Like, very humanitarian, like, founded a bunch of Red Cross clubs on campus and stuff. And she drove all the way from Coachella Valley to CSULA. It takes about, like, 2 hours, to see Ben speak, because she was invited to go there. And so she goes there, and she tries to get into the door, tries to go in and enter and see Ben speak. But then the protesters wouldn't let her, and they noticed that she was a part of YAF because she's leader of YAF in Coachella Valley. So so what happened was that they assaulted her. They groped her and ragdolled her, which means that they shake him to the point where it's kind of like a ragdoll, basically. And so as that was going on, a police officer comes up and escorts her out. And at first she's thinking to herself, okay, thank you, the police officer saved from the situation. But it turns out the police officer blamed her for the situation, said that she was the one agitating them, and that basically told her, it's like, you have to leave or else I'm going to arrest you. And just like that, she was kicked off of campus for doing nothing. And she was viciously assaulted. And it's disgusting this kind of stuff is happening on college campuses now. But, I mean, it's basically fascism on our doorstep. Because we put such a high priority on feelings over facts and logic. That's why Ben says all the time, facts don't care about your feelings. And really give serious props to him for basically having the balls to stand up to these people and basically giving them the finger. And hopefully he takes on more of these spoiled brats as rest of his college tours as coming up. And it should be. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. But it is a very scary development and something we have to fight back on, or else we live under fascism soon.
Yeah, it's really. I thought it was insane that there was such a huge riot, and I've seen disasters on college campuses. Not at that scale, but I've seen it happen before when people go crazy, but not like I honestly don't think Ben is that controversial. He's not going in there and advocating the overthrow of a system or something like that. He's talking about personal responsibility. He's talking about freedom to say what you want, essentially. But I don't know how he's controversial at all, quite frankly.
Well, it's just because he has an opposing point of view, and he's really good at expressing that point of view, and he doesn't back down in the face of pressure. Unfortunately, that's now controversial now on leftist college campuses.
Yeah, it is. So, Amanda, I want you to talk about the Streisand effect, because I think it was Breitbart that coined that term. How whenever they ban something like a speech or a speaker, or, for example, my sister was telling me about a Disney movie that was banned for supposed racist content, and the Streisand effect, of course, makes you want to see the banned content so bad. So, of course, I went and watched it, and there wasn't anything racial in it at all that I could see. So,
what movie was it?
It was called Song of the South.
Oh, why was it? Yeah. Were they opposed to it just because there was a lot of like Southern language from like the 1800s or something being used on there?
Yeah, well, it depicted a plantation post Civil War, but there weren't any racial slurs in it. There wasn't anything like that in it at all. And nowadays people wouldn't have even thought twice about it. Maybe there was something racial in it back in the 40s when it was made. But the bottom line is, what I want Amanda to talk about is.
So I think because of that, so it'll like push it kind of underground. I think that's the main argument people say. So if we squash free speech, like that Disney movie, right? You can't talk about it. A lot of that stuff gets moved underground. Like you kind of see that manifesting in people who are like Donald Trump fans and stuff. So I know it's like a small stuff, whatever. But again, like Donald Trump stands for anti-political correct or against political correct language. So you kind of have it like distilled with Donald Trump, and you see it come out. So it just like kind of moves underground, so nothing gets worked out. So you just kind of like nothing gets fixed when we have this politically correct squash free speech environment. So it just gets pushed underground. That's like you kind of see it with some Donald Trump fans. You see it on the left and right, but it gets pushed down. So I think that's one of the main effects. And again, like just getting back to what Aaron was talking about. It is like a really big service that Ben and Milo are doing, going to these college campuses and just showing what is going on. Just getting a camera there, showing what is going on. And it was so important that Ben went when he was banned. I know they lifted the ban an hour before, but he was banned, and he still went, and that's important because then showing that and showing how outrageous it is to silence any dissent is just insane. Like we need to keep putting spotlights on that. Again, Missouri, like University of Missouri, that was kind of like one of the main things that got this going. That showed how insane. They're basically fascist. They're basically fascist. And again, Ben was part of that too. But I think that's important too, to shine a light on how extreme they are. So I think
really, I totally agree with you, because college campuses, ever since I started going to college, I've been attacked by college professors, and my you can't write certain essays in college, which is completely antithetical to what the purpose of going to college is. I mean, we can only write certain things, So,
I mean, it was. Thankfully, I didn't have any of that at Cal Poly. Of course, that's not really like it's not as bad as it's not as bad as in terms of leftism. But I mean, there were certain things that happened though, because like my first year of college, Ann Coulter came to campus. And I mean, she was as Ann Coulter usually is. I mean, very like inflammatory and provocative, and she actually drove a liberal person to tears, and he had it coming. and he's actually a friend, and the person's actually a friend of mine, but like he had it coming. And the thing is that the following week they had like this big seminar about how we need to invite people to campuses that are a lot less, they're a lot less provocative, don't hurt people's feelings. And I'm like, oh my god, really?
That's what that's code for. They agree with me. That's what that's code for.
Exactly, yeah. And of course, at the time, it was I just kind of shrugged it off, but that was kind of the seedlings for what's going on today.
Yeah.
And right when the Missouri thing happened, so I wrote about this a couple of times, but at Cal Poly, the Public College Republicans, which I was a part of when I was there, like in November, there's just this thing called Freedom Week that YAF puts on, and what the college Republicans at Cal Poly do is they build like a fake Berlin Wall. People basically lace it with whatever comments they want. It's a free speech wall. There's all kinds of really weird stuff on there, but it's free speech. And then at the end of the week, you tear it down to symbolize free speech. Well, this year, right around when Mizzou happened, there were some things on the Berlin Wall that were deemed offensive, and there was a bunch of college leftists that were offended by it. And then that led to this whole movement called Slow Solidarity. They started listing all these demands they expected from the school, like one of which was some sort of system where like you report on offensive things people say, and then it leads to a punishment or something like that. I would recommend people read my articles about this. I've written two articles about it. But I mean, while it's not as bad as like what you see at CSULA, that's still it's still pretty bad, and it could escalate further if that kind of thing isn't really stopped, So, and my point is that if it's happening on a Cal Poly, which is not really that bad of a campus in terms of leftism, then it's really everywhere, basically.
It bleeds into the culture, obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, Pew Research did a poll. 40% of millennials were okay with banning offensive speech. Like, that's insane. That's insane. So it obviously leaks into the culture, and that's absolutely insane. I mean, that's not just college students. That's 18 to 34-year-olds. That's millennials.
And that same demographic, that same poll also said that most millennials favor socialism.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all related, basically.
Yeah. That's our future. And like, I understand in college, they're going to grow up, and you always want to change the world, and you're trying to combat everything, but that's a large swath of people. That's a lot, and again, like, that's our future. And
it's pretty scary.
This whole movement, that's affecting everything.
Yeah, and again,
is. Yeah, and it's also like a testament to. I mean, this is okay because I obviously look at feminists a lot, and it's kind of like the same thing you see is that when you run out of grievances, when you run out of things to complain about, it's like just feelings or just things that don't matter. So because we've come so far, because there's been a lot of progress, now we're on to like feelings. Like that's what needs to be protected, because there's like nothing else to go after. Like there's not really legislation or things like that. So that's why we kind of see this happening. And then also, I know Ben talked about this too, that people, like politicians, they use this for their gain, like succumbing to different groups like Black Lives Matter and such, like dividing us that way. That helps them politically. So again, we see it growing from them too. So it's just, I don't see an end in sight, especially if we have a Trump or a Hillary. Either way, I don't see an end in sight. It's depressing.
Yeah, it is depressing. That's what it's all about. It's like they're never satisfied. They're always angry about something, whether it's feminism, whether it's these race hucksters like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, and so forth. It's like in the Black Lives Matter movement, they're always going to find something to be angry about. That's why you have to really rise up against it and try and stop it before we've reached the point of no return.
Yeah, and taking away free speech, and you can't, obviously that's not going to fix anything. Just getting rid of the other viewpoint, how are we going to move forward? There's no, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, you can't. It's just all authoritarianism. That was just the last end game.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's exactly what Aaron was talking about the left eating their own, because it's now the liberal college professors that were the students of the 60s, they're now having the students come back and bite them for all of the disgusting things that they teach in college.
We're done with
I still can't. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're done with speaking. The same people who they called for his resignation. Covino. They called for his resignation. So like they just eat their own. Like he's banning free speech. He's on their side, and then that hour before he unbanned it, what have you. then they call for his resignation. They're boycotting him, they're picketing him. It's hilarious. I mean, he deserves it, but it's
Oh yeah.
It'll never end. It's a vicious cycle. So someone will be victimized.
Aaron, were you able to actually get into the room where Ben was talking, or were you still stuck
no,
outside the whole time?
As soon as it's right before we got there. I got a call and basically they told me that like there was only way we could get in, so they told us to cover the protest instead. So it was actually So me and Josh were both there, covering the protest, and Josh has his own work on this stuff. That's really good too. And so it's me, Josh, and Michael Knowles, our social media guy. We were all there covering it. And so we covered it pretty extensively on the site, so check it out. And basically, they told me that, like, so it looks like Harry's with us now.
Yeah.
How's it going, Harry?
The hat, no.
Work on this stuff. And so it's me, Josh, and Michael Knowles.
Harry, turn off the video in the background.
If the input,
my bad.
Can you hear us, Harry?
Static part.
Yeah.
Yeah, turn off the video in the background.
I did not notice that was on. Okay.
Okay. We have Harry with us. Harry is with us. This is very exciting. Okay. So I do have Canadian questions for you because obviously Harry is from Canada. But why don't you tell us what is exactly designation? Do you like to call yourself somebody who contributes to the Daily Wire, to the Rebel Media? Just introduce yourself to the rest of us.
Okay, so I'm Harry. So originally, I guess I started writing for a website my friend started. So that's bizvest.com. This was like kind of January of last year. And then from there, I think so the first, I saw Ben Shapiro's email somewhere on Twitter, kind of like Amanda, I guess, and I just
he sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, so I screenshotted like the crap out of like 8 times, and then I sent him something. I think it was like Justin Trudeau related. And then so I never actually heard back from him, but it did get posted. But I didn't even know it was posted on the Daily Wire. And I didn't find out until I think at some point I arbitrarily kind of decided to Google my name at some point for whatever reason. I kind of just wanted to see if the article.
That's always fun, isn't it? Googling your own name.
Yeah, it is. So at some point I did, and then I just noticed that so I saw the kind of the headline of my article, and it said the Daily Wire, so I was kind of surprised. And then I clicked on it, and I was like, oh, Ben actually saw my email. And then I guess from there, I just kept sending him stuff. So that's how I kind of started contributing to the Daily Wire. For the Rebel Media, there was there's this Facebook group who I was sending articles to share them. These were like the BizVest articles. I was sending to this Facebook group, and so the person who runs the Facebook group also happened to be the editor of a website. And this is called CIJ News, Canadian Israeli Jewish News. That's a website you can also check out. So the group manager then asked me if I wanted to write articles for their website too. So from there I started contributing to CIJ News. And the person who runs CIJ News happens to be kind of friends with Ezra Levant, who is, as you know, Rebel Media co-founder, or founder of that Rebel Media. So from then he kind of introduced me to Ezra and to the person who kind of handles contributors at Rebel Media, and like that I got into Rebel Media. So I guess I write for bizvest.com, which was started, so a friend of mine in high school, Milan Amini. You could follow him on Twitter if you want, at Milan Amini1.
Okay.
And then as far as like the stuff I contribute to, that's the Daily Wire, Rebel Media, and CIJ News.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously we're talking about free speech in the United States, but tell us a little bit about what is free speech like in Canada, because obviously you guys do not have a First Amendment to protect you guys at all. So what are the consequences of offensive and controversial speech in Canada?
So it's just actually a couple minutes ago earlier today I was reading, this was an article on Breitbart Tech. Are you guys familiar with Lauren Southern from Rebel Media?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not familiar.
So she was. I didn't read it. into the filming, but she was supposed to cover an event in Vancouver, and apparently someone was supposed to come speak in Vancouver, but it got canceled because some feminists were really mad at this guy. I don't know I didn't read into it, so I don't know who he actually is. But and then where he was going to speak, there were big protests. So Lauren went there to cover the actual protests, and so she was surrounded by a group of feminists, and so she was talking to them. And at some point, she said she kind of announced there were only two genders, male and female. And apparently, this was a very controversial thing to say because. So after she said this, we could see in the video, someone poured a bottle of urine on Lauren Southern.
Oh my God.
What?
Yeah.
It's
on.
Seems a little unnecessary.
That's just.
The whole thing's
I
on
would
video.
like ugh, that is disgusting.
And yeah. So as far as free speech goes, I guess that kind of sums up how friendly people are here to that. So yeah, this was in Vancouver. It's the actual article. It should be all on Breitbart, but I think if you follow her on Twitter, she was kind of tweeting about it too. She didn't want. She said she doesn't want to play victim, so she doesn't know how she's going to go through it. There were some other people who were kind of doused by urine because she was there with some reporters. But yeah, it was definitely unexpected for her. And I guess besides that,
yeah, and for viewers at Southern.
Yeah, at Lauren Southern.
Yeah.
And then so I mean, besides that, with regards to actual free speech in Canada, so there is no kind of protection under the Charter for free speech. There are, like, officially, it's not comparable, obviously, to other countries like the Middle East or whatever, where there's literally no free speech. It's fairly like we have hate speech laws, but they're fairly like they're not flexed as much. There was a case, I know, like the Rebel Media founder Ezra Levant, he got sued for libel or something in Europe, but he appealed, and I think that's okay now. But I mean, there are cases like that where in Canada you're kind of, you can be sued for things you say. Which, I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of hate speech laws in general. I think hate speech is a part of free speech.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
Is it one person's hate speech is another person's free speech?
Yeah, I mean, it's all subjective, of course, right? Like something you say that you think is just your opinion, I can just say, oh, that's hate speech, right?
So, Aaron, I wanted to ask you, is there a limit, and this can be your opinion or it can be based on research, is there a limit to how much free speech the First Amendment should cover?
From my understanding, I think the limit should basically is just incitement. Like the kind of thing, like you can't you basically, like, I think the rule is always like you can't shout fire in a crowded theater or something like that. I think the real limit is just like you can't you can't explicitly call for like breaking the law. So like there was Michael Brown's stepfather, like right after the jury acquitted Darren Wilson. For instance, like he shouted to a bunch of people like, "Let's burn this bitch down." Basically, that's incitement, okay? Because he's called people to burn down the city, and the city basically was burned down, and still hasn't really recovered from that. So I think stuff like that. That's where I think the limit of free speech is. But basically, as long as you don't advocate for breaking the law, then there really is no limit on free speech. It can be as offensive and vile as you want, but as long as you're not advocating for breaking the law, it's protected.
Yeah, I think and the police there were instructed to leave them room to protest, So again, you can just see how biased it is. Again, they're just shutting down one guy.
And on that point, so Ashley Ann Hobbins, her father, who reached out to me about this, like he actually pointed out to the police, like said, hey, like these people here are the ones that are causing violence. Just if you take them out, this whole thing, this thing will simmer down. They just basically ignored him. Yeah. And the thing is that the police kept saying that they couldn't let anybody in because the room was over capacity. If you watch the video, Ben speaks, that room was not at full capacity, even close. Yeah, but which is why Josh was smart enough to get that on camera and put that in one of his stories about the incident. So, yeah, I think we all are under the impression that CSULA told them to stand down, basically. Yeah. Which is unfortunate because, if the police hadn't stood down and had took care of some of these, penny fascists, as Ben calls them, then maybe those protests stop and people can get in and actually watch Ben speak.
Yeah, and you know, have dialogue and question him.
Yeah.
You know, people wanted to go in and question him. And one of the people, I think, Aaron, that you talked about, I think the disabled man said that he was like an atheist and like wanted to question, challenge Ben's ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, he really wanted to question Ben's views on God. I really would have liked to see that happen, you know, but we couldn't because of these protesters.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah, really, the protesters were hurting their own cause because nobody with an opposing point of view could get into the speech and question Ben. I love being able to do that myself. I've done it many times.
Me too.
I think I even sent Aaron one of my videos of it was either me or my dad going up and harassing some person in the meeting as I'm
Yeah,
walking.
I remember. Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
But yeah, it's Ben was very open about it. Come and question me and you know, express your own opinion. If you disagree with me, that's what I'm here for. And they just wanted to shut the entire thing down. And here's a question I have for Amanda. Why is it that the left is so xenophobic of other ideas? I mean, they're always talking about how the right is somehow xenophobic, but they will not entertain the idea that there is a point of view other than theirs that's okay to have.
Yeah, and I think it's because the left, I mean, this has always been their tactic, is that, you know, character attacks. They want to castigate any dissent as like a racist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, all of that. So these kids are being brainwashed or being told that this is, you know, this is hate speech, and hate speech. I don't know if they think it's not covered or what. It doesn't matter, but they're saying they think it's that anything Ben says, even though he said nothing racist at all. Yeah. It's going to be racist, and we need to get him out because it's hate speech. And again, Ben was talking about diversity of ideas trumping diversity of the melanin in your skin. Like, right. I don't understand how that is, you know, that's racist. But I think it comes from the left's tactics of castigating their dissent as racist, xenophobic, whatever. So because they consistently do, which is a smart tactic, you know, because it obviously works, and it silences any dissent. Because if you're automatically called a racist, you have one leg to stand on. So and again, I keep talking about Ben, but I mean, that's why he says when you debate someone, you take that off the table, because that's not true. And that's like right. One of the key things that they do. And I think that helps foster all this squashing of free speech and First Amendment, because these professors, I mean, they're all embedded in school and universities. They're telling them that, you know, this dissent is evil, it's hate, it's racist, it's this. So I think that helps foster it.
I think that's one of the problems we have with the Republican Party, is they're so scared of being called a racist. Yeah. You can't be called racist. It's going to go down in the history books as we were called racist. Oh my gosh, it's terrible, it's scary. But I love it how Milo says, just say you don't care. Just say I don't care. And I've used it, and it works. Just say I don't care. And then, you know, they get all
because it's not true. Because it's not true.
Yeah. Well, and that's what Ben says. If somebody calls you racist, you say back to them, well, you're an asshole. Yeah. And then that basically counteracts the effect, because he likes to say being called racist is one of the most horrible things you can be called. It's really a douche move. So just call him a douche, call him a jackass, whatever, because they deserve it if they're calling you racist. And that only takes a personal attacks off the table. They can get back to the actual substance of it.
Yeah, because right now nothing's being solved because it's all solved.
Yeah.
It's one of the best quotes I think Ben has is, whenever someone calls you a racist, the proper response is not, this is why I'm not a racist, right? The proper response is, no, you're a jackass.
That's what I was saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Yeah.
Harry, are there any free speech protections at all in Canada, or is it just completely subjective to whatever the powers that be determine what you can say and what you can't say?
So, I mean, officially there are a lot, like under the Charter, like there's no such thing as a First Amendment. So it's technically like nothing. It's not really protected. There's only specific laws that say kind of things that you can be prosecuted with, like incitement of violence, hate speech.
What is hate speech defined as? Sorry.
Well, it's so I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I haven't looked into it specifically, but it's like, I guess technically, even you could sue anyone, right?
Yeah.
What you consider hate speech, then you will go to the courts. It's really up to them to decide if it, you know, if you can be convicted or not. And then one thing I just kind of like want to go back to with regards to what was happening at Ben's speech and in other campuses, I think a lot of the students who kind of protest and try to shut them down, I think a lot of them deep down they kind of know they have to be wrong with what they believe, because if they truly believe they were right with what I guess their opinion is, in contrary to Ben's, they would somehow be able to debate him, right? But if you know you're wrong, then the only solution you can have is just to shut down your opposition. But I think deep, I don't know if it's all of them or if it's some of them, deep down there has to be some that know that what they believe is flawed, right? Because if they really believed in their side, they would try to argue their side.
Yeah, it's almost like an insecurity. I'm sure there's some of them that just believe it wholeheartedly, but they really are insecure in what they believe, or they wouldn't have to resort to violence in order to shut other people down.
Yeah.
Ben,
those kids were vicious. Those kids were like vicious and on the attack.
Yeah.
Like they were completely brainwashed. Like I don't think there was much like rationale going on there. It was you're hateful. You need to be stopped. Like I don't. Yeah, I think that was the majority of it. I'm sure there are people like Harry's describing, but I think the majority of them were like brainwashed as all hell, and these people are evil and hate. They didn't look into anything what Ben had to say. They just were told that he was hateful and a racist and this, and they just took it.
Do they find whoever pulled the fire alarm?
Oh
yeah. They didn't know. I mean, nothing was done after them. Everybody knew it was just trying to get him out. Ben just kind of said, "No, I'm not leaving." I don't think anybody really even tried to find out who pulled the fire alarm. The whole mob was cheering outside.
That was crazy, and the look on Ben's face was just priceless. It should be a meme. When he looked like he was going to spontaneously combust and burn the place down. But he kept talking.
I got to cover most of his stuff, and it was so fun. It was the best assignment I had, just to cover like I mean, I obviously wasn't there, which sucks, but just cover like Ben's reaction and stuff, and it was just classic. Like they are not going to stop me. It was so good. But also like awesome, transcribing Ben talk for like 30 seconds takes 20 minutes because he says like 10,000 words in like a minute. So that was terrible, but it was still.
So, what exactly has caused college campuses to become so close-minded? Obviously, the liberal college professors, but it seems to me that it's not just the liberal college professors, but also a failure on the part of conservative college professors or conservative, activists who have allowed these things to continue to happen. That's why I'm so glad that these things are finally coming out now, and Ben and Milo giving these speeches, because I've been in college for 7 long years, and I've been dealing with it for 7 long years of college professors telling me, oh, no, you can't write that, or we're going to give you an F, or we're going to slap a D on that, or no, that's not good, you can't say that, or, oh my gosh, Kelly, you said something that we didn't. I mean, we've been dealing with it, behind the scenes this whole time, and it's only now becoming national news. So I guess I want to throw this one to Aaron. Why have conservatives let this slide for so long?
Because conservatives tend to give up too easily, and that's the problem. It's typically the left never gives up. They always press hard, no matter how daunting they seem. They always play the long game. They're always the ones that fight, where they believe. And we conservatives just kind of like, we have the mindset, just leave me alone,
Yeah.
So it causes us to be too passive sometimes. So a lot of times, I was guilty of this too sometimes. You don't always speak up in class when your professor says something that's basically left us diatribe, or when a student says something like that. And conservative professors, the same sort of thing. But in their case, a lot of conservative professors, they can't speak up because they know that they'll be ostracized within the faculty and might even get fired. So it's like they can't really speak up. But in students' case, they just sort of because they don't want to risk the bad grade. They don't want to risk being ostracized by their peers on campus. And it's really hard to blame them, because it's a really hard environment. I mean, it's really hard, to speak up and stand up for what's right. I mean, and thank God that more people now are doing this. But that's why it's happened, but unfortunately, this is the byproduct of it. So now I think it's it's basically worth risking everything in order to stand up against it, because if we don't, then there goes free speech, and I think that's something that's worth fighting for, no matter the consequence.
Yeah, I would just add, like, it also grows because, so Aaron's right, so they, like, infiltrated the schools, infiltrate the culture, so that's, again, they have momentum that way, and then what Aaron was saying, like, if you speak up against it, you can lose your livelihood, like these professors, etc. And then also it's their tactics of castigating the other side as racist. Like, you don't want to be called a racist, so you just shut up, and that, I think those tactics also helped foster all of this, because again, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to be called a racist. I'm not going to be called this. I'm not going to be called this, because it's impossible to fight again, right? They're not going to listen to you if you're deemed a racist. So I think that helped them to grow it. So again, it's like apathy on conservatives' part of it, and then it's also their tactics are just damning.
Yeah, it's also hard when you're a first-year college student, because that's when I had most of my poor college experience happened. My first year of college, you get in there and you think, oh, if I just fly under the radar, it'll be fine. No. Yeah. and I think it's a problem that students don't know what kind of action they can take when they do get, a D on an A paper, for example. They don't know that you can go to the dean, you can, write to various news organizations and put this in front of people and say this teacher or that teacher is grading me on a bias that is outrageous, and so on and so forth. But as a first-year college student, you're just like testing the waters, and you have no idea what's going on, and then you just kind of learn, oh, I can't write about this, or I can't talk about that, or I can't push these boundaries here or there. So I guess we kind of have covered Ben's speak quite a bit. I just gotta say, I died when I saw Milo questioning the White House press secretary about his Twitter verification.
I thought that was Photoshop. To be honest, I didn't believe that was actually real.
I just pretty funny. Talk about the ultimate troll.
It made my day yesterday. It was the most wonderful moment of my life. So Harry, I want you to react to that. What didn't you just feel like you were absolutely represented in that room?
No, yeah, honestly, I mean, the last person I expected talking to Josh Earnest was Milo Yiannopoulos. I mean, because I saw the video and I thought, wow, this is really good Photoshop. But then I saw the article because it was actually on Breitbart where Milo was talking about it. So I thought, okay, maybe this actually did happen. And I actually thought it was. So I thought it was interesting what his take on it was. Where essentially, according to him, so he said that Josh Earnest told him, that he should be able to file a lawsuit against Twitter or Facebook for impeaching on his First Amendment rights. And so I usually agree with Milo on basically everything, but I don't know how closely I agree with that point where of course I disagree with what Twitter's doing, how they kind of censor libertarians and conservatives, but at the end of the day it's a private company. So in the same way I don't think that I should be able to force like a Christian baker to bake a gay wedding cake, for example. I don't think it's right to force Twitter to not censor conservatives, right? I think it's their company; they can do what they want, and ultimately, I think it will affect their bottom line if they're censoring, I guess, half their audience. If it's roughly half the country's, let's say, conservative, or 40%. I think it's going to hurt them at the end, but I don't think a lawsuit is the right way to solve the issue.
Right. Well, I think Ben said in his speech that if Twitter continues this, then they're just gonna. I think he might start advancing together, start their own social media site. They will definitely do a lot better than what Twitter's. I mean, Twitter I think is losing a lot of money anyway, and they're probably going to lose even more if they continue this up. I mean, suspending. I think the breaking point for a lot of conservatives was the fact that they suspended Robert Stacey McCain's account just because he was speaking out against feminism, and he's really Robert Stacey McCain's a really smart dude, and it's really too bad they did that to him, and so if they keep it up, they're going to go out of business very fast.
Yeah, I agree exactly what you both just said. That's exactly right. It's a private company, and that's the difference between the left and the right. Like, we recognize that, but so does the other side. It wouldn't be.
I need to create my own version of Twitter since I'm like the social media queen. So, are there types of material You know you agree with me, Amanda.
I do.
know you agree with me. Okay.
I do.
So,
Yeah.
actually, I wanna go. Let's go to safe spaces and trigger warnings. Amanda, I want you to kind of define that, because for people that are in college, and my audience on Twitter is actually a lot older than me. For people that are not in college, define safe spaces and trigger warnings. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so microaggressions are basically if you say something that I guess triggers someone or makes them offended, even though you have no intent of doing so. That's a microaggression. So again, you can say the sky is blue and someone's like, hey, that's offensive, then you just microaggress them. It's very subjective. It's insane. So because of these things, they have like a trigger warning before, if you're going to read something where there's, I don't know, someone was raped or whatever, they'll have a trigger warning so you know ahead of time to brace yourself for what you read, which is pathetic. Like, this is college. Grow up. And then also they have safe spaces. So like, I think it was Christina Hoff Sommers, really the factual feminist. I love her. She gave a speech, and they literally had like a room with like candy and stuff, like a safe space with like pillows for kids to go so they could get away from her hate because of what she was saying. She was being critical of the feminist movement. So I mean, they literally have like zones, like safe spaces where you can go to be away from dissenting viewpoints. It's absolutely insane. So this is all over college campuses. I've been out of college for a couple of years, but and I went to a Christian school, so I can't really attest to anything personally, but just what I've seen, it's quite insane. Quite insane.
I think they had like therapy sessions after.
I went.
Yeah, that's so stupid.
I mean, at some point, it just becomes satire. That's just how bad it is.
Yeah, I know. It's like The Onion, but reality.
Yeah.
It's like that's what the world's becoming now. It's just one giant Onion article, but it's reality, so it's kind of scary.
Oh my God.
Some of the assignments I'll get, like one time I literally had to email Ben back, and I was like, is this satire? He's like, no, that's real. I was like, oh, like, it's getting so bad. But,
it really is, yeah.
It's really pathetic.
Kind of like during the Republican debate, I thought I was watching a TV show. You couldn't.
I know. It's a tough time.
I thought it was like the Apprentice election 2016. Like, I didn't know.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like this one of these elections is becoming so stupid. It's like at first we were talking about illegal immigration, which is good, and now we're talking about this. Now we're talking about Donald Trump's genitalia. It's like, really? Yeah. This is what we. This is politics 2016 now. Oh my God.
Yeah. When I was watching it, I was like, great. This is what I'm going to write about tomorrow. I'm going to be assigned to write about.
And you were, right? Weren't you?
And I was, and I did.
Yes, you were.
Like, what
That's
is my
your
life?
thing, Amanda.
Yeah, I was like, of course, I'll get this. But yeah, awful. Terrible. But Donald Trump is like kind of the...
It's
he's bred from this, like the PC anti-speech movement. That's what we get. That's why that's like the one thing you can point to, and that's why squashing free speech and being PC is terrible, because look what we get out of it. Like, look at this dumb ass that we get out of it. Like,
well, I mean, it's I mean that's really what's driving it. The fact that it's so anti-politically correct. Unfortunately, Donald Trump goes a lot farther than that. He starts becoming very vulgar, unrude, and he tends to be not so high on free speech himself, given that he's talking about opening up libel laws and sues any news outlet that writes an article he doesn't agree with. So I think he's basically he's going to be like a right-wing version of Barack Obama. If he gets elected, which he won't. I mean, he's going to get his clock clean in the general election against Hillary. Because I was writing yesterday a video from Steven Crowder where he talked about this, about why Republicans deserve to lose. And it's like, when leftists, like these presidents, like the candidates that they have, like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, they have obvious like weak spots. Like as Crowder said, it's a video game. It's the big red dot that you're supposed to hit with your laser. For Obama, it was Obamacare, and we responded to that by nominating literally the only person in the world who fathered Obamacare before Romney did. I mean, literally, I think any one of us would have been a better nominee than Mitt Romney, because none of us fathered Obamacare, but he did. And then he could attack Obama's main weakness, and he lost. Hillary's main weakness is the fact that she's incredibly unlikable. She has the second highest unfavorability ratings in the history of presidential candidates. Right, you kind of stole the punchline, but yes.
Sorry.
It's okay, but yeah, so that's her main weakness. And of course, we're going to nominate the guy who has the highest unfavorability ratings in the history of presidential candidates in Donald Trump. So it's like we deserve to lose if we're going to keep nominating these people that obviously aren't going to win. So
sad. So depressing.
It's a disaster. I was so depressed after listening to Ben's Thursday podcast.
I didn't listen to it. What did he say?
Okay.
She said Thursday's podcast.
He basically made me want to commit suicide.
Oh, really?
I think we, yeah.
I think one good
We
point
got
he
a
had
really bad lag right
in
now.
the podcast
Okay.
was, I think he mentioned kind of how if Barack Obama was the left's reaction to George W. Bush, and if Donald Trump is the reaction to Barack Obama, then what the hell is the reaction to Donald Trump going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah.
That's really scary.
Really, oh, it's just gonna keep getting worse and getting worse and getting worse, isn't it? But that's why we're here. I cannot wait until I'm 30 and I'll run for this in California, and Aaron will be my campaign manager and my
Okay, that should be
spokesperson.
fun.
And he'll have his own radio show at the same time.
That's right. Yeah, so I can give my big voice will help you out.
Okay, so Harry, I wanted to ask if you have any warning for the United States, since Canada's not necessarily a bastion for free speech. If you had anything, if there were any changes that the United States could make to keep us from becoming like Canada or Europe, what could we possibly do?
Well, I mean, I think the Constitution is pretty great. I have a lot of respect for the Constitution, like the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. I mean, so long as, I think, which kind of ties into the 2016 race, which is the scary part, is if, what would happen with the Supreme Court. I think that's the big risk, I guess, of having Hillary Clinton win, is the threat to the First Amendment, to the Second Amendment, which, I mean, so long as you have the Constitution and it's protected, it's not infringed upon by a liberal Supreme Court, I think you're fairly safe. So I guess the advice I would have is...
Yeah, I wish it was that simple, but...
Yeah.
But there's no question that, like, if Scalia's role is filled by a big activist, like someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg type, then we're screwed.
Yeah. That's the only reason why I'm hesitant on the Never Trump thing, by the way. But
yeah, me too. I mean, I'm a little more tempted to do so because, I mean, California's going to go for Hillary anyway.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, well, maybe at this point I could just write in Ben's name just because. But yeah, I mean, but I'm definitely like, but by the day I'm becoming more and more Never Trump.
Me too, yeah.
And I can't bring myself to vote for Rubio either. Basically, it's Ted Cruz or bust for me at this point.
Mm-hmm. Really? You wouldn't, if Rubio was the... If Rubio was the nominee, you wouldn't vote for Rubio?
I go back and forth on that, but the main thing just comes down to what?
That's just stupid. That's just stupid.
No, because
Rubio, like
because Rubio is a frontman for Amnesty. He's part of the establishment now.
Okay,
and
but
it's like for years,
but when your alternative is Hillary Clinton and you have Rubio, you vote Rubio. Like, I don't...
Maybe, but it's just the point is that it seems like for years, like, the establishment always gets their man, and business as usual keeps happening in Washington D.C. Nothing changes.
Yeah.
And it basically gives that's a big reason why Donald Trump is where he is right now, is because of the establishment. And unfortunately, there's the supporters that kind of diluted the words to make people who don't fully comprehend the problem of the establishment to just kind of like write off like, oh, there go Trump supporters again. But the establishment is a problem, and that's why Donald Trump is where he is. And the main thing too is that with Rubio is the fact that if he's elected president, it's not going to be a matter of if it's going to be amnesty. It's going to be a matter of when, because with him and Paul Ryan, who Paul Ryan's very far left on this issue, and so is Rubio too. He's not honest about it. I mean, within 12 to 18 months, we will get amnesty, and then the country goes the way of California, and then that's it.
My theory on Rubio is that he's the equivalent of Romney in the sense that Romney, losing issue was Obamacare because and so Rubio, I mean, Romney was the author of essentially the author of Obamacare, and Rubio is the author of amnesty, literally. And so that's, Rubio loses. Aaron and I, we vote in California. It doesn't matter which way we vote. It always goes to the left. But for people that do have a vote that counts, we don't think any of us have a vote that counts in here. But for anybody that does, if you're watching, if anybody has a vote anywhere, they're probably just going to stay home if Rubio's the nominee, because immigration is the #1 issue, and Rubio is the author of amnesty.
And on that point, literally. I mean, there's a lot more.
I just don't see Rubio winning.
Me neither. But on that point, I mean, Rubio's a lot closer to Romney than meets the eye, because it is an article in Politico that calls him Mitt Romney 2.0, basically. And if you look at Rubio's campaign team, there's a lot of overlap between his campaign team and Romney's campaign team in 2012 and 2008. In fact, his campaign manager, Terry Sullivan, I think, was Romney's campaign manager in 2008. And if you look at Rubio's actual policies, they're not that much different than Mitt Romney's policies in 2012. And for that matter, Rubio's plan has healthcare but has an individual mandate in it. It's not as explicit as the Obamacare mandate, but his plan has a refundable tax credit for $2,000 to purchase healthcare. So the effect's the same, because it's like you pay $2,000 in taxes unless you buy healthcare, which is basically what the Obamacare mandate is. That was what the Romney Care mandate is. So, his foreign policy is more the Bush neocon, democracy project foreign policies people are tired of. His tax plan really is, it's fine, but it's not anything to be excited about. It's very net. And Rubio's fun about all these open borders groups. He has a lot of advisors and aides that are very far left, open borders and stuff like that. So, I mean, people still think of Rubio as the same guy that took on Charlie Crist in 2010 and won. But ever since he joined the Gang of 8, he's sold us all the establishment now. And that's why it's hard for me to vote for him, just because like these same people are the ones that are part of the problem. I just can't bring myself to vote for these people. I can't vote for Trump either, because I mean he's basically a tyrant to a certain extent. But I can't vote for the establishment again. So it's Ted Cruz or bust at this point. And if Rubio as supporters knew what's good for them, he'd drop out today and join a unity ticket with Cruz. That's the only way to stop Trump at this point. It's the only way. Outside of a worker convention, which would be a disaster.
Yeah, that'd be a disaster. End of the party.
Yeah. And I think if Trump's nominated, it's probably the end anyway.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh no, okay, your turn.
Where do you guys think Republicans fall short when they're trying to sell the conservative message? We'll start with Amanda. I want everybody to question, though. But Ben's often talking about how Cruz's main problem is in his optics, and he just doesn't look, honest. He has a bad, I forget the word he used, but he just has, I think he said physiognomy. His physiognomy is just really bad. He just looks nice, even though he's probably the most honest guy up there. So where do you think Republicans fall short in areas, maybe not necessarily optics, but could be their message, the conservative idea?
Yeah, well, I mean, if there's one good thing from Donald Trump that we can look at is his example of, taking it to the media. I mean, of course, it's just on who's nice to him that day. It has nothing to do with principle. But not tiptoeing around things, saying what you mean. And like there are just a lot of issues where we don't want to be called a racist. We don't want to be called it, we have logic and the right and like the right things on our side. Speak what you have to say. Call out the media. I know Ben always talks about this. Call out the media. Don't let them attack you. Don't let them deem you a racist. Don't let them let you have one foot in this argument. Like you need to take on the media, call them out. They ask you an unfair question, tell them. And look how much Trump has attracted, because he is brash, he is to the point, he is going to take on the media. The people, we definitely fall short in that. We just kind of take a back seat, and the media is the way that it is, and that's how it goes. And no, fight it every second. Go after them. I know Ben always says this, you're in an interview, you just go up that, hey, you used to work for Hillary Clinton, you used to work for Bill Clinton, so okay, now let's talk. We just always take a back seat.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely part of it. and again, I blocked of castigating anyone who disagrees as a racist. That no, I'm not, and I'm not going to shut up and hear facts. Like you're the a-hole, you know, and kind of go around that way. But I think if there's anything to learn, anything good about Donald Trump, it's that you have to go at it. You know, you can't tiptoe around what we want. You have to be fierce about it. Like Ted Cruz has these qualities, but like Ben said, like the optics of Ted Cruz, I think he literally said he was born with that mug. Like I think that's the way it is, you know. But taking it to him, not backing down. People want that. People want that masculinity, especially when we have Obama, who's like tried to neuter the whole United States. So I think just being more outspoken and taking people on and calling them out for who they are and standing up against what they castigate you as, I think that would help. And then again, obviously, like media, like cultural things like Hollywood, like conservatives need to get into these things. Like when there's like a conservative movie and things like that, we need to go support it. We need to go there and do these things. And I like the thing that Ben said about Twitter. Like, if they're going to censor us, let's get our own. Like, we need to start actively getting into this stuff. Try to infiltrate the schools. Like, look at their tactics and come at them. Again, it's like a fight for our lives. So I think that's kind of where we're losing the fight. Those three aspects.
Right, and I think that's why a lot of people like Donald Trump is because he is showing the blueprint how to take down the media. And also, I think one of the best things he did was basically neuter the whole war on women meme by saying, "Yo, Hillary, like you enabled your husband's slandering escapades, so it's like you can't call me a sexist." And that almost single-handedly like took the war on women issue off the table.
Exactly.
And so Republicans need to learn from Trump's model, and you can see Cruz do it a little bit because just this week, an interview with George Stephanopoulos, he said like, "Yeah, your boss Hillary Clinton," and it's like we need to see more of that Ted Cruz because I think I agree with Ben on the optics thing. But the other thing, and this is what Rush said earlier this week, is that Ted Cruz speaks like in a coded language that is something that only those of us who move with conservatives can understand.
Yeah.
But because I think he's trying to go for the extended base strategy, which is good. But the problem is that there's limited appeal outside of that. So what he needs to do is to explain how conservatism actually helps the working men and women, and how like that's basically people have a home in conservatism because most people are conservative in how they live their lives. And he's starting to do that more now. I think we saw that when he basically cross-examined Trump in the debate on Thursday. So if it's kind of too bad we see more of this like after Iowa, but I mean there's the Ted Cruz that is going to be throughout the rest of the campaign. Maybe he does have a good chance to win this still, but like I said, it only works if Rubio drops out at some point.
Yeah, Aaron, that was a perfect example of the Hillary Clinton and the castigating him as a sexist was a perfect example. Perfect example.
Yeah.
That's all.
So Harry, is there anything you wanted to add to that conversation?
So I think kind of one good thing to point out is if you kind of analyze the race so far and just kind of pretend if Donald Trump had never ran for president, where would we be right now? And I mean, basically, I would argue Ted Cruz would have been clobbered by the media. I don't think he would have been the front runner.
I'm not happy with that, but
I agree with that.
Possibly John Kasich. At the very best, Marco Rubio.
I agree.
I disagree. I think if Donald Trump had ever ran to the race, Ted Cruz would be running away with this right now.
I don't think so. I think Harry, I think you have a good point. Not standing up to the media, I think he would have got clobbered. I think you're right. I think that's a really good point. We would have been with Kasich or Rubio at best. I think that's
because most of the southern states.
I think Donald Trump. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot they could learn from what Trump's done what he's done properly in his campaign, and who knows, maybe in 4 years they could, someone could pick up where maybe Scott Walker or someone could pick up what Trump did and run a campaign like that. We'll see.
It's a good point, Harry.
All right. I think we pretty much covered our free speech topic. I know Amanda has to leave, and I'm very sad, but we'll bring you back again, I'm sure, and we're very happy to have you. And I'm very excited to have Mark join us.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you. For those of you who don't know, Mark is the videographer who shot the video where the college professor Melissa Click told him that she was going to get some muscle and throw him out. My gosh, how scandalous. So, Mark, I want you to give the viewers some backstory about the situation, because obviously I think this happened back in November, and what I believe the protests were over various racial incidences. There was like the poop swastika drawn on a bathroom wall or something, and somebody yelled, some drunk student yelled a racial slur at another black student or something like that. So
Off campus.
yeah, so go back to that and tell us exactly what led up to these protests.
Sure. This was the intersection of a lot of social movements on campus. It wasn't just the race. In August, because of the Affordable Care Act, the IRS said that graduate students at the university could no longer or they were considered full-time employees, so that they and then they were not allowed to, as employers, they were not allowed to subsidize or provide stipends for their health care. So the university canceled the graduate students' health subsidies with 24 hours notice, and that was a major screw up on their part. But even before that, though, there was the MU for Mike Brown movement set up in response to the Ferguson crisis. Ferguson, everyone knows this. A black man was shot by a police officer, and there was no indictment. So there were obviously a lot of protests as a result of that. Columbia, Missouri, where University of Missouri is located, is about a 2-hour drive from St. Louis, where Ferguson is near, and so as a result, this was pretty close to the epicenter of this big racial conversation happening 2 hours away. So it, I think where this really turned up to 11 is when Peyton Head, the Missouri Student Association body president, posted on Facebook that allegedly some students had drunkenly yelled the N-word at him. Peyton Head is black. He's also gay. So he signed off by saying he was very frustrated about this encounter. So he signed off your F-word, N-word student body president, Peyton Head. And he did not redact that. That's how he said it. And then, let's see, there was homecoming. Homecoming is a big deal in the University of Missouri. University of Missouri started the homecoming tradition, and there were a lot of protests related to that homecoming weekend in the build-up to that. So what happened was a Legion of Black Collegians which is a black activist group that's established on campus. It's been around since 1950 or so, or 1965. Was dress rehearsing for this, for some sort of play or something for homecoming, and a drunk student belligerently walked up and onto stage and was just kind of hanging out, and they started getting angry at him, and he said, "These N-words are getting aggressive with me." So that it was in front of a black audience, so that quickly escalated, and there's no footage of this happening, but or what exactly does happen, but the end result of this is that the chancellor for the university records a selfie video of himself apologizing for this and saying that although we value free speech, this is we don't accept racial hatred on campus, which is complete nonsense, because there's no hate speech exception to the United States Constitution. So he sent out this mass email, and he put up that video, and I was very angry because less than 24 hours, even though no crime had been committed, this student had been identified, and they had removed them from the university pending an investigation. No due process, no procedures followed, nothing. They just had removed him from campus because, ostensibly, because he was a danger to the campus. I don't know. And FIRE, Foundation for Human Rights and Education, wrote a letter, but no one knows what happened to that guy, because there's no transparency, obviously, with personnel matters. So I think slightly as a response to that, you saw, like, less than a week later, John Butler, who starts this concerned student movement on campus with 11 other students, or 10 other students, and they make I think nine demands, and they say no, sorry, I'm getting my timelines mixed up. I think this hadn't happened yet. So they show up at the homecoming parade the morning of, and they block the University of Missouri system president's Cadillac. They jump in front in traffic, and they start reciting all of the racial incidents that had supposedly happened to students at the University of Missouri the past few decades. And so they were there about a good 8 or 9 minutes, and then the police arrived and they dispersed them. We found out later that Melissa Click was actually a part of this protest, and that did somewhat lead to her undoing, I believe. So months go by. Tim Wolf.
Is that video online?
Is that video online? There's 2 videos online. Actually, now a third of Melissa Click screaming at a police officer. 2 emerged in October. One was by the Missourian local newspaper. One is by the Concerned Student Group, and they both show. The Missourian starts later, but it's more high quality. The Concerned Student ones is just smartphone footage showing the whole thing, but not the Melissa Click incident, which emerges later. So nothing happens for months, and then, or a month or so, and then I think November 1st or October 29th, Jonathan Butler announces he's going on hunger strike. He's because the University of Missouri system president hasn't acknowledged this incident that happened at the parade, and at the same time they release 9 demands asking that Tim Wolf step down as system president. This is where it, and John Butler didn't ask Concerned Student whether they wanted him to go through a hunger strike. It was just something he decided to do. The system president at that point kind of doubled down, and he said he started meeting with Concerned Student, but they made it clear to him that there was nothing he could do to assuage their concerns, and they wanted him to step down and write a handwritten apology to the University of Missouri students, announcing acknowledging his white privilege and step down. So this is not making
Mark, what is your
happen.
role at the college, and what?
Yep.
What is your role at the college, and how did you get involved with this in the first place?
I'm just an independent journalist. I also write for, at the time I wrote for the Maneater student newspaper, no longer as a result of this incident. So I'm just there as a bystander, as somebody who's affected by what Concerned Student is doing. So 9 days into this hunger strike, or no, let's see, probably 7 days or so, they get the MU football team involved. They go on strike. They say they're not going to play until John Butler speaks again. And Gary Pinkel, the head coach, didn't condemn that or really say anything, except he tweeted a photo of the team with the hashtag Concerned Student 1950. So Tim Wolf wasn't getting any support from the head football coach. That's what when MU football's involvement is, I believe, what caused Tim Wolf to step down. They were going to lose $1 million from a fee because you're obligated to play a certain number of football games, and because they were going to have to forfeit a game, they were going to have to pay $1 million in fines to the SEC. And like right up to the minute, Monday morning, November 9th, it was looking like Tim Wolf was not backing down. There was no way to avoid this inevitable clash of wants. The Concerned Student wanted to have him out no matter what. If that meant John Butler had to die, then he had to die. And this, so November 9th, I showed up to class not really knowing if Tim Wolf if anything would happen that day. I brought my camera, just a small point and shoot, not my DSLR, because I'm on my bike, so I didn't bring it that day. Wish I had. But I had heard rumors all night that somebody might be getting fired the next day. I didn't know who.
So this was the day of the protest that you videoed went viral?
Yep, this is the day. And the faculty, all I knew were that the grad students and the faculty were going to walk out in solidarity with John Butler. Walk out of class, not teach that day. So I went to my first class. We got there. We voted that we weren't going to have class. So I walked over to the main protest site, which is on a public area of campus called Carnahan Quad. And as I was walking there, we got the news, heard the shout go up that Tim Wolf had resigned. So I got there at a pretty timely moment. So he resigned at 10:15 a.m. And I just started shooting. They made a quick announcement that Concerned Student wouldn't be speaking to the media until their press conference afternoon, and they would like us to respect their privacy. So okay.
Their privacy in a public area.
Public space, yeah, ridiculous. And then, so I thought that was as far as it would go. I mean, you can't just kick the media off a public area. But it turns out that's what they did. Right after the students stepped down, a number of media walked up to her to get an interview, and a professor who was later known to me as Melissa Click reached out and grabbed this man's camera. What she says later is that one of the camera crews hit her with her camera. That's not actually what happened. So I only captured the tail end of that confrontation. I didn't get the actual trading of blows. I just saw it with my own eyes, and was not pleased that this was the way it was going to go. There were about like 20 minutes or 15 minutes of celebration after that. I was filming throughout, and then they kicked us out. They said within a time span of 2 minutes, they were pretty PO'd at the media for some reason, and they told us to leave. So they started spontaneously forming this wall, and eventually encompassed the entire encampment. And they and I found myself on the opposite side of the wall, outside the main tent area where they'd been camped all week. So I look over my shoulder on my left. I'm standing my ground. I see this other guy. He's a little closer, and he looks like he's with the professional media. And he's, yeah, that's Tim Ty. And he was not known to me at the time. But I just walked over to see what was going on because things looked. He was interacting with a professor, and there were some words and being traded, and it was not looking good. So I went over there for his safety because I had the camera. I figured.
Is Tim Ty with ESPN?
He was working in freelancing for them at the time. He had just gotten his assignment an hour before, but he also works for the Missourian newspaper for his full-time gig. So I walk over and I figured that would help keep him safe, right? Filming this, keeping people from escalating any more than they already were. Turned out it didn't. There was a professor who later turned out, I found out to be one of his former professors, was not helping him deflect the kind of attention he was getting. They were pushing him, and he was standing his ground, and he appealed to him for help, and he said, "Don't look at me. I'm just watching and getting a kick out of this." Is what he was saying. And I don't know, just the sort of visceral reaction and the crowd sort of surprised me. They didn't seem to understand that you don't have a right to privacy in a public area.
Right.
And at numerous times they told Tim Ty and I that they were going to call the police on us. So this all escalates, and then about 6 or 7 minutes into this encounter, they decide enough is enough, and they start pushing Tim Ty back. And by this point, my body was turned enough that no one really noticed the camera anymore. So I ended up on the inside of the circle as they were pushing past me. I didn't push my way through. I just by happenstance found myself on the inside of the circle. And so I figured I'd make the best of the situation. So I found who I wanted to talk to, who was the professor I had seen earlier, pushing that man's camera out of the way, and I basically just wanted to know, okay, so what's the big idea? Why do you feel that the media doesn't have a right to cover your story? And so I announced myself as media, and before I could go any further, she shut me down. She said, "You cannot be here. If you're with the media, you need to go." And then she called for muscle. Which I thought was inappropriate. At this point, I wasn't 100% sure she was a professor, but I just figure in a town like Columbia, where you have the highest concentration of PhDs in the country, that she was probably a professor. And then she makes her call for muscle, and that's where the video that went super viral stops. But there's also an additional video that shows the full encounter after that, where she's continuing to single me out as somebody she doesn't want there, and as and they're getting physical, and they're when the muscle arrives, and they're pushing me backwards. And I eventually relent, because I just figured it's not worth it to get the story if I'm going to get harmed over this. And MU football was involved in this protest, so I didn't know if they were going to start getting physical with me, if any of them happened to be there.
Were you actually physically thrown out?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, I was pushed. It doesn't take much. I'm a light featherweight guy. Tim Ty and I are about the same height, 6'2", but that's the only advantage I had was I was slightly taller than some of them. So I was like, okay, that's enough. I draw the line at right before I get physically punched, so I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So I left, and just figured getting the story wasn't worth it at that point.
Well, you got quite a story anyway. You got
Not the
Yeah.
story I wanted. So yeah, and then I leave the circle, and there's this momentary break where the rest of the journalists file in because there's this break in the circle, and everyone rushes in. So as I was kicked out, it kind of backfired, and everyone ran in, and then they it's not as apparent on the footage, but they get physically assaulted, and much worse things happen to them than what happened to me. It's a shame that wasn't filmed, because the narrative that it was just a peaceful encounter is totally false.
Right. So I want to bring Aaron and Harry in if you guys have any questions for Mark.
So this was just like your own like personal website, or was it for like a school publication that you were trying to get footage of?
I edit just for fun as a volunteer on Wikipedia. There wasn't an entry up for it yet, but there was later. I did end up uploading the footage 2 days later. But I wasn't on assignment for anybody. I was just there as a spectator, and
Just as a citizen journalist,
neutral
basically,
party.
right?
Yeah.
And so they just upload it to YouTube, and they just kind of started sharing it, and then went viral.
It actually went viral on Facebook first. I uploaded it there, okay. and I sent it. It was up for about an hour, and then my photo editor with the Maneater shared it, and then the first articles about this started appearing. One was by, I think the first to break the story was Reason magazine.
Right.
I actually forget the author, but as soon as I saw it, there wasn't any media or anything on the page. It was just a short couple graphs about what had happened. And I said, "Hey, there's this video. Do you want to look at it?" And he said, "Sure." And I sent it to him, and he linked to it. And he said, "Wow, this is great. So can you put it on YouTube?" And I said, "Sure." And after I uploaded it, it took about 3 or 4 hours for it to really start exploding. It was up to about 500 shares at 4 o'clock, and probably by that afternoon, the YouTube videos started picking up even more. Probably had about 100,000 views at that point, whereas the Facebook video had about 200,000. And so who was first? I think I got emails right away from St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Breitbart, and a few student publications. And then so like probably around midnight, the Associated Press asked for it, which I did. I just gave it to them. I wasn't trying to make money off of this or anything. I just wanted to get attention to the video. So it got tossed around with an AP byline, which was great because
That's great.
Probably the least professional video that's ever appeared on AP.
So what's been kind of like the reaction you got from it? Like, were people on campus like supportive of you?
Well,
or, like,
the first reactions were better. People were genuinely concerned about this incident. People who were supporters of the movement were extremely angry that this was allowed to take place, that there were professors involved, and just a general sympathy or people were sympathetic with the way the First Amendment had turned in public opinion. And it was great. Later, the reaction started turning more angry and making this about a personal issue with Melissa Click and Jana Basler, which I don't agree with what they did that day. I just don't know if I think you might waste. That's not the best use of everyone's energies to make this an issue about a person. I think this is an issue that you see on just about any college campus you look at, which is what I've been trying to get people to focus on now, unsuccessfully. So yeah, that morning, around noon, Melissa Click did email me, and she said she wanted to apologize. I showed up at her office. At first, she didn't want to talk to me, but eventually she let us in, and she apologized and wasn't willing to make specific admissions about what she had done wrong, like that journalists had a right to cover the story, and just because there's a heckler's veto doesn't mean you can kick the media out. She only disagreed with her methods of removing us. She wasn't, in principle, against what she had done to remove the media. She probably would have done the same if she thought she wasn't going to be captured on video. So I said, that's not quite enough. Can you go on the record with me with a journalist? We could. I'm supposed to go on the local NPR. Why don't you go on with me? And she said she'd think about it. And she didn't agree to it. She just. So I went and did my interview, and she never contacted us back. We didn't know what was going on for a number of days, and it just looked like that wasn't going to happen. There wasn't going to be any kind of large-scale admittal of what she had done wrong. So I was not willing to accept her apology, and I told that to probably like the Washington Post and USA Today, and that's the story that ran was. So Tim Tai accepted her apology. I did not, and that's when I didn't accept that apology. That was when I was in for this for the long haul, because she wasn't going to just make an admission that she was wrong after investing so much in the story that she wasn't. So I thought. So this story lasted about a week before people lost interest, and it was just kind of put on the back burner for the longest time.
So now she's been arrested, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, she wasn't arrested. So, yeah.
She's fired, right? Isn't she?
Yeah, I actually filed assault charges against her Monday night. When this happened. And those took a while to process. So there wasn't a lot moving on the Click front until about December, January. First, the Missouri Students Association in about mid-December released a statement, or released a they decided that the administration had to release a statement about this, so they demanded that administration release some kind of statement about this. The administration didn't respond. Then a number of weeks later, the Missouri legislature, about I want to say 11 Republicans in the Senate and 99 Republicans in the House of Representatives signed a statement saying that University of Missouri should fire Melissa Click for her behavior, and so that's what set the ball rolling. Was the Board of Curators obviously heard about this what the legislature had done, and the legislature was threatening to withhold funding, so they kind of sprung into action, and they launched their own. After 2 weeks after this, they finally, after Melissa Click was was charged with assault officially. The University Board of Curators launched their investigation and suspended her with pay. And she was fighting it the whole way. She didn't want. She had to pull in a bunch of substitutes so that someone would teach her class, and she was not happy about being removed from her students. And so I think after, so first her assault charge was commuted. It was I forget what the term is, but it was she's on probation for about a year. She can't break the law, and if she doesn't, then she doesn't get charged with the crime.
Mm-hmm.
But then I want to say last Thursday, I think it was, the Board of Curators voted after seeing the investigation given by a third-party attorney based on the results of that investigation and the emergence of this new footage showing Melissa Click screaming at a police officer at the homecoming parade in October.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yep. Missourian obtained some body camera footage from the parade where it showed Melissa Click yelling profanities at a police officer. And right after that, Hank Foley, the interim chancellor, announced this was not acceptable behavior for a faculty member, and he would be talking to the Board of Curators.
And that video prior to yours?
Yep, this was almost a month before my November video. So it established a pattern of behavior, which was inconsistent with a sterling 12-year career in academia, as she sort of put it. So in that video, I've talked to others since my video went viral, and it does generally seem to be consistent with her past behavior towards the media. Mm-hmm. And it was actually in the investigation they interviewed the chair of the communication department, and his quote was in the investigation was that her voice could be heard ringing throughout the halls of the communication department because she was so shrill and disagreeable. And I think all that together in my video showed that this was not just the 8 seconds that went viral, or even the other footage I captured that day. It was the epitome of her career. I just happened to be filming, and that's the only reason anything got moving.
Yeah, it sounds like she had a history. I've had college professors like her doing the same things. It's just none of it's ever been caught on video and gone viral and all of that. But the main reason why I wanted to bring you on is because we've kind of been experiencing a pattern, as you say, of incidents like these on college campuses. Obviously, Aaron was trying to cover Ben Shapiro's speech that he gave down at CSU LA, and Aaron couldn't even get in at all. And he works for the guy. So, what are the conclusions that you kind of draw from what's been going on across the country at all these different college campuses? That press aren't being allowed in. Obviously, there's no legal precedent. I have a friend who's a lawyer also, and he said there's no legal precedent to keep the media off of a public place where there's a protest going. So what kind of do you think about all of this, especially as kind of an independent journalist yourself?
Sure. I every day I look at the headlines. I work for the College Fix now, which is a conservative.
Oh, nice. You know Jacob Vine, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was there at CCLA too. She's a nice lady, very great lady.
I don't know any other writers, but I'm covering the University of Missouri beat, and it's really fun and exciting. Like every time I refresh the homepage on the College Fix, it's like, this is. Are you sure this isn't happening at the University of Missouri? Because this is pretty similar to what we're experiencing here, and I think a lot of colleges were inspired by concerned students' protest methods, and there were there were all these hashtags. We support Mizzou or something to that effect on social media. So they were obviously getting the idea from somewhere, and I think probably put Stanford and Mizzou up in the probably the two campuses that are most active right now with racial protests. That's just my limited experience from not really following this story too well until November, but but I just see it everywhere, and I'd love to say it's just a liberal problem, which would make the problem much smaller in scope. But actually, I see this kind of everywhere. I used to be an officer in an atheist group, and someone I presume may have been somewhat conservative and leaning complained about an extra credit assignment that a professor had assigned for our conference in March last year, and it was escalated to the dean, and and nothing ever came of it, luckily. Possibly because University of Missouri is somewhat liberal leaning, so we looked at there. But man, you can imagine. I don't know. I think students now are more sensitive than they've ever been. It's hard to say because I'm only 22 years old, and but race relations right now are, well, at least perceptions of race relations are way down from what they used to be. I want to say it's Pew or somebody recently released a poll.
I wrote about that. I think it was Rasmussen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what's his first name?
Oh, Scott Rasmussen. But the polling cup is called Rasmussen polling cup. I think it was Rasmussen. So Rasmussen or Gallup, one of those two. But yeah, it's said that race relations are, the people in the race relations have declined under Obama than they have improved, which is funny because like one of the main selling points for Obama was that race relations would improve, and they obviously haven't because he's a race-baiting president.
Yeah, I would assume that's more of a perception issue than an actual, like that people have become somehow more racist within the past half decade. It's the I don't know. It's like I've been a cop accountability follower for years. I like websites like Photography is Not a Crime, where they talk about stories where the police force is really corrupt and has some probably racial preferences, profiling, but I think you just saw with was it Tamir Rice and then Mike Brown and I don't know who else back in 2012 that set all of this off.
Oh, Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin, sorry.
Yeah.
Tamir Rice was later.
Yeah.
This was. I don't know. I don't pretend to know that I understand how race works in the police force, but obviously I have a problem with the methods that protesters are using. Black Lives Matter, what you saw going on in Ferguson a year and a half ago, and I wish I had a good prescription or a diagnosis for the problem, but I really just don't. I'm just as bewildered as the rest of the country is at how people think that race relations are down as much as they are.
Well, I mean, it's because we have a race-baiting president. I mean, he's the one that's always talking about
I'm
like,
just excited that this is kind of coming out.
Sorry?
Go ahead, Aaron.
No, I was going to say that, like, because Obama always
Go
says
ahead.
he's Biden's son, he'd look like Trayvon, expressing support for the Black Lives Matter movement, even though they're basically a cop-hating movement. Saying the police acted stupidly when they arrested his friend Henry Louis Gates. Even though Professor Gates was acting belligerently and being very loud and accusatory towards the police, and stuff like that, where he's basically race baiting, and it causes this anger. It's just really unjustified, irrational anger that's spurring the Black Lives Matter movement, which is basically like a black supremacist cop-hating movement. And it's kind of almost like we're on the verge of a race war if stuff like this continues. So. In that sense, yeah, race relations are down because the race hucksters have benefited a lot under the Obama presidency, and it's really sickening that that's what the country's starting to become, but that's unfortunately what is happening.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's the president, but I also think the media pours a lot of fire on a lot of gasoline on this fire because it's like you can't, every time there's a black person and a white police officer involved in any situation, it's immediately racism. The cop is immediately a white supremacist, and the black person is immediately an angel with no fault whatsoever. And they kind of, like, the media digs up, like, one photo of the guy who got shot when he was in, like, the most innocent-looking situation, and they try to find a picture of the cop when he's in, like, the most kind of worst face he can make, and they print these out, and they completely spin the same narrative every single time. So I think that plays a really big role also into what's happening.
And when the opposite happens, it's like it's covered because there have been incidents like a black cop has shot an unarmed white teen, and that gets zero press coverage other than like one local news story. It's like with the Trayvon Martin case, like George Zimmerman, like the New York Times called him a white Hispanic. It's like, what does that mean? It's like that was never a thing until the New York Slimes, as Mark Levin calls them. It wasn't a thing before they created that term because George Zimmerman, is a Hispanic, and if they report as Hispanic kills black dude, then that racial narrative is kind of the whole white supremacist, white supremacist narrative kind of goes away. So that's why they had to invent that term. And then NBC edited a phone call to make it seem like George Zimmerman was racist when he called 911. But when the full footage comes out, it turns out he was just answering their questions. So stuff like that where it's like, yeah, of course the media is trying to perpetuate this narrative, and it submits the media in conjunction with President Obama and the left and so forth. It's really they're the ones to blame for all this race baiting. And now we're seeing it come to fruition now, the Black Lives Matter movement and with these fascist protests on college campuses.
Do you think that, because none of this really happened until about 2012, Trayvon Martin was killed February 2012.
Right.
And do you think that represents a big deviation from Obama's first term, or what's your take?
It's been consistent throughout his whole term. It was obvious from the get-go that he was a race-baiting president. Again, like in 2009, that was when he first made the police acted stupidly statement. And throughout his career, he's been and even before he was in the presidency, as a community organizer, there was a lot of racial agitation that he was a part of because that's what Solinsky-ites do, is that they agitate. And so his whole presidency has been about agitating. And one of those has been agitating on the issues of race. He sat in the pew for 20 years listening to Reverend Jeremiah Wright basically go on about bashing the white man and blaming kind of the white man for America's failures and stuff like that. So it's sort of like, it's been nice to say, like Malcolm X has won, MLK has lost, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So
So as far as free speech is concerned, do you guys, and this is kind of an open question, do you guys think that we are getting worse? I mean, not actually getting national coverage on issues that kind of been, you know, not necessarily suppressed, but we're only now starting to really see really violent and passionate response, you know, for and in favor or for or against free speech. Do you think that things are going to get worse before they start to get better, or are they not going to get better at all? Or what is exactly the state of free speech in the United States at this point?
Well,
I
I think
think-
the next president would set the tone. Certainly depends on who's elected. I think
Anybody?
right. Like I think if Hillary Clinton's elected, we're gonna see at least another 4 years of like a race-baiting president, or I mean, we might even see, you know, the radical feminism thing jump into it and be kind of it might be expanded a lot more because of that. Like when we had Barack Obama, that certainly made race relations a lot worse. Maybe Hillary Clinton would make the whole gender thing a lot worse. Like you'll see, like the gender gap might actually, like the gender pay gap might actually be a bigger discussion somehow. So you know, I think, you know, whoever is elected president would certainly set the tone for the next several years for sure.
Yeah, I guess that's the one good thing about President Trump would be that the political correctness you would hope would go by the wayside. Well, the problem is that, of course, he suppressed, he engages in suppression of free speech himself. I don't see how this gets any better anytime soon. It's just it's so ingrained in college campuses, and it's, you know, that's basically the rising generation, as Levin likes to say, that's going to be dominating our culture and politics for years to come. So it's so hard to really slice into the whole feelings mindset. It's something you just have to keep fighting against over time, and so it's just something we have to brace ourselves for, just sort of be ready to fight back against it and go on offense like Ben likes to do. And even outside of college campuses, I mean, we see the IRS has been silencing Tea Party groups just because, you know, it's just for political dissent. You saw the Department of Justice censor the Associated Press and wiretap, you know, Fox News reporters James Rosen's cell phone and so forth. So free speech is under assault, and it's not going to get better anytime soon, I don't think. It's just something we have to kind of brace. Like I said, we just have to go on offense about it and continue to expose what's going on in government and in our culture and on college campuses.
The way, you know, I'm a little skeptical just how much the president can be fuel to this racial discussion, because like just about every time it's the students are the ones speaking about this most vocally, and then when it gets to a point where the president has to say something public about this, and he's like, and he just kind of passively affirms what their message is. I don't see the president leading the discussion too much. I think if this is going to change, it's probably going to come from the students first. It will most certainly not be from the college administration, because the administration and the students are completely at odds with each other. And it's just the administration, which is conservative relative to the student body, which is cowed into affirming college students' liberal beliefs. I don't see the administration or politics as having really any sway over this.
Well, I think you're right. That has come from the students first, because I think Andrew Breitbart liked to say politics flows upstream from culture, but I think the president could have some sway. It's because you see, and you kind of said it yourself, because you said that he's not actively leading the discussion. Well, he should be leading the discussion. I mean, he's the president. He has the bully pulpit. He can get free media anytime he wants to, because he's the president. You know, if we had a president that really was in favor of free speech, he could go to a news outlet and say that what they're kind of echo what Ben's saying, just saying, you know, what these students are doing is wrong and needs to stop. And frankly, I don't know why the state or even the federal government didn't issue the National Guard against these students. I mean, they're being violent. The police should have been more involved in trying to get this violence at college campuses to stop. That would go a large way to prevent it from happening, because if there was actually police action against them, then that sets a precedent. It sets a deterrent against college students from acting like this. But the fact that there hasn't been kind of emboldens them to continue doing so. So I think the president should have sway on this, and there should be police action taken when stuff gets violent. If it's peaceful protests, okay, fine. But when it becomes violent and it suppresses free speech, use National Guard.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a couple things the president has to say that would kind of easily suppress a lot of the kind of Black Lives Matter and these radical movements. Just make a press conference, get on TV, and explicitly say, dear Black people, there is, no one is oppressing you. This is America. Everyone is equal under the law. You're responsible for your children. You're responsible for your own actions. So take responsibility and don't try to blame this non-existent oppressive system that you're trying to protest against.
Right. In 1965, Watts writes, when Reagan was governor of California, he actively spoke out against the riots that were going on, and he said, well, the law is the law. We can't. It's like we're not gonna just suspend the law just because it's people of different race are protesting. It's violently protesting and rioting. So he used the law and put down the Watts riots. That's the kind of leadership that should be taken when stuff like this occurs in college campuses and so forth.
If anybody wants to jump in. Otherwise, I'm really excited that you guys were able to come today, especially Mark. I think it's really amazing how we're all able to do this through social media, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so active with free speech, because once we get it taken away, it's not going to come back, or not easily anyway. So you guys can follow Mark at, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Is it Schierbecker or Schierbecker?
Schierbecker.
Schierbecker. Okay, at Schierbecker Marks. You can follow Amanda Presto at Amanda Presto. You can follow Aaron at Bandler's Banter. You can follow Harry at Harry1T6, I believe. And you can follow me at WarriorWoman91, because you probably already are if you're watching this live stream. So if anybody has any shout-outs they want to give, please feel free. Otherwise, we're going to start
let's start with, I'll give a shout-out to Michael Knowles, who's one of the social media guys for the Daily Wire. He's awesome. I gave him a follow. Also, I'd like to give a shout-out to someone named Jonathan Henderson. He has a blog that he runs where he has this formula that he applies to closed primaries and caucuses. It has this formula that adjusts the poll numbers to these closed primaries and caucuses, because one of the patterns about Trump so far is that he dominates these open primaries, but when it comes closed, he doesn't do as well. So he has this formula that he uses to better project who the winner is going to be of these primaries. He came closer than any other pundit did on Super Tuesday to the results. So give him a follow. He has a lot of interesting stuff. Give Mike Vander, I think his name is Gillian, Mike Vander Gillian from PJ Media a follow. Interesting stuff there. Also follow Paul, I think he's Paul Feller, however you pronounce his last name. He and I have been going at it a lot on Twitter lately, but he's been very respectful to me and has defended me a lot when I've come under attack from leftists. So give him a follow. He's a nice guy. And, of course, give Proud Texan a follow if you haven't already. He's one of the funniest people on Twitter. You give him a follow, too.
Yeah, and everybody go follow at Ben Shapiro, because he's, again, why we're all here, and why
and of course,
I have
Milo, too, at Nero.
disconnected.
I think everyone already follows.
At nearly.
But
Yeah.
I'll give a shout out to Dave Rubin on the Rubin Report. He's actually a liberal, and it's part of Rubin of Aura TV. He used to be part of the Young Turks, and he does a lot to call out the liberal establishment for supporting. He calls it the regressive left policies, basically endorsing other cultures that are at odds with Western liberal values, and he does a great job of it. Also, Faisal Saeed Al-Muhtar, he's one of my best online friends. He's also been on the Rubin Report before, and he's from Iraq, and he's a refugee, and I really like him. They're both liberal, but both very against this regressive left ideology.
Yeah, the Rubin Report's actually pretty good for a liberal show. They brought Ben on, and I watched that whole thing, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, they had.
And they brought Milo on, and Milo's a dear friend of mine. So, all right. So, I think we are gonna close this down. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really enjoyed having you.
Thanks
And
for
we're
having
gonna
us
go
on.
off.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.